What's up, everybody? This is FTW with Imad Khan. I'm your host, Imad Khan, and joining me today on this Saudi-funded development edition is freelance LEC reporter Tom Matthiesen.
Hi.
And later on, we'll have editor-in-chief of the Esports Bar Association Journal, Michael Aaron. But first, Neom. Earlier this week, it was announced that the League of Legends European Championship Series, or LEC, had signed a deal with Neom, a Saudi-funded city development project. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is aiming for Neom to be a major tourist attraction in the future as the country continues to diversify its assets. But as soon as rumors of the deal began to percolate, fans, casters, and players online were quick to criticize the deal. Given Saudi Arabia's track record on human rights abuses, discrimination, and violence towards members of the LGBTQ community, the ongoing war and humanitarian disaster in Yemen, plus the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, people expected more of Riot Games. Within 24 hours, Riot reversed the decision and will not be partnering with Neom, and will likely have to find another partner in the Middle East region. So Tom, what does this Neom fiasco mean for the LEC in the Middle East region moving forward?
So I think it's important to put this into perspective that I think in the long run, this will probably not be as, deleterious to the relationship. Riot has hosted events in Saudi Arabia in the past. Obviously, it does weigh in that that Neom is a pet project of the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself. We just really don't know what went down behind the scenes. First of all, forming this partnership, and second, when it was taken down. It's just it's not known to the public what has gone down with Riot and with these negotiations. But yeah, I cannot imagine Neom being very happy with this partnership being cancelled so rapidly.
And yeah, Saudi Arabia does have a fund that invests in multiple companies to help diversify its portfolio, including companies like Uber. And in the past, when Uber has been questioned about these instances, including the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, Uber has been very kind of hands-off, saying that they half condemn, what happened, but still are very appreciative of the Saudi dollars flowing into the company. I was surprised by how quickly Riot was able to about face on this.
Yeah, that is something that many people were surprised about as well. Positively surprised, I have to say. Obviously this deal going through in the first place is a big red flag, and I do hope, as many people do, that there will be systemic changes within at least the LEC partnership. I do hope that there will be some reforms within the LEC's partnership department, that these deals in the future will not be allowed to go through. And they really thought they would get away with it, but you have to acknowledge the fact that they were so quick to respond. And it is a bit weird, right? That on one hand, the LEC promoted this partnership on their Twitter with still the LGBT flag in their logo, in their Twitter profile, and promoting a deal with a country that is so notorious for violating the rights of those very people.
In a statement, Riot's Albert Guerrero said, "As a company and as a league, we know that it's important to recognize when we have made a mistake and quickly work to correct them. After further reflection, while we remain steadfastly committed to all of our players and fans worldwide, including those living in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, the LEC has ended its partnership with Neom effective immediately." So in this statement, they're acknowledging that, this was a mistake, going so far as to say it was a mistake. Then that, kind of has me wondering, because also on Friday, League of Legends announced that it would be hosting its Worlds in Shanghai. And given pretty much everything that's happening within China, because China, too, is not innocent of human rights violations, most notably with what's happening with the Uyghur minority in the western province of Xinjiang.
Yes.
Why is it that Riot is so quick to about face on Saudi, but where's the outcry in regards to China?
Well, it's going to be very difficult for Riot to ignore China. They are owned by Tencent, after all. That's a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate based in China. So Riot Games is fully owned by a Chinese company, and it's going to be very difficult for them to just say, we're going to cancel our events in China. Also, China is a very big market for League of Legends, so I don't see that happening anytime soon. Obviously, at least with the Western faces of the company, that is quite hypocritical, and people are very right to condemn and question and call Riot out for these partnerships continuing and for these events continuing. And that is something that was a commonly heard criticism at the time of this announcement as well, that people were saying, okay, you have canceled this partnership, but you are still also partnered with Nestle, who are a very shady company, at least in their business, what they do selling bottled water and stuff like that. They partner with KitKat, who they cut down rainforests in order to provide palm oil for their product, and that those are all things that people call Riot out for. And I think it's definitely fair to some degree. Where do you draw the line? And that is a very difficult decision to make. It's a very large gray area, and there's all different shades of gray. But I think the problem with the Neom partnership was the fact that it was so in your face wrong going on. This is literally Saudi Arabia giving the LEC money when they are building a mega city on the grounds of a tribe that's being evicted forcefully, and in a country where LGBT rights are so, grotesquely violated.
Right, but that's not to say that Tencent isn't this independent company within China. Clearly, Tencent has very strong ties to the CCP and is likely getting some kind of funding from the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government in general.
Yes, Tencent is on very good terms with the Chinese government, yes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying in the fact that Neom is very directly funded by the Saudi government. Like, it's literally a pet project of Mohammed bin Salman. But because there may be this very opaque screen in front of Tencent, does that then make it so that the League of Legends community can ignore what's happening in China?
No, and they are not really ignoring it. I think it's more that that's something they've learned to live with and something they've accepted they just cannot do anything about. The company that makes their game is owned by a Chinese conglomerate who has very good relationships with the Chinese government itself. And that is something they cannot change, but where they will speak up, and that in and of itself, I think is a good thing. That at least when they see that a line is being crossed, a new line is being crossed, that they speak up so massively and that they do not quietly accept this. But there definitely is something to say. What is the line you draw for yourself? And I think that's something that everybody's faced with every day. Like you said, first, Uber is also getting money from Saudi Arabia. Facebook is getting money from Saudi Arabia. Should we stop using those services then as well? And that is a very ethical question. But I think the grim reality is, and something that is very tough maybe to realize, or for maybe people have actively realized it and decided to live with it, is that in the end, in this world, it seems that money just talks, and you cannot avoid having products delivered without any of these shady ties. It's very rare that this happens. All these major companies are in a way connected to slave labor or any other human rights violations, or they violate nature, and that is so difficult to avoid that. And you see that in the League of Legends community as well.
Assuming the Neom deal had gone through and let's say G2 or Rogue, these LEC teams essentially boycotted these events, what would their punishments have been?
I think that's very difficult to say. We know at least that these LEC teams were kind of informed about this deal, as reported by ESPN. There was a meeting and business representatives of these LEC teams were present, and there was on one slideshow apparently a brief mention on the Neom partnership, but other than that, teams weren't really involved and informed about it. So we don't know what the punishment would have been. We do know that the casting talent, the on-air talent, went to Riot and said, listen, as long as this partnership is up, we are not casting the LEC, which is obviously a very bold statement. They're literally putting their jobs on the line, and very commendable of them that they did that. Yeah, it's so difficult to say what the punishment would have been for these teams. We know at least one team owner, Carlos, the owner of G2, he spoke out publicly on Twitter and he said, we will not ever be part of a direct relationship with anybody committing genocide or anything of the sort. So what the punishment would have been for these teams, well, they could have just gotten fines for not showing up during the matches. That is something that happens. Teams have a fine for when they turn up too late for an event. But in the long term, what this partnership would have done, I think that's very difficult to say. These teams are still in a 3-year partnership when they bought into League of Legends European Championship. So what the specifics are of that deal and what the specifics are of when these teams decide to step out because of a partnership like this, it's very difficult to say. But Riot Games generally is pretty severe with their punishment. So I think maybe these teams could have received a pretty big fine.
And then I guess the last question, how do you think history will look at these nascent times of esports in which these companies are choosing to go to these countries that are having these, grave human rights violations, in the same way that history has not been kind to the United States or France or Spain or all the other countries that competed in the 1932 Summer Olympics in Nazi Germany.
The important thing is to know that there is another esports organization that is partnering with Neom currently. It's Blast. They host mainly CSGO events, and people are criticizing them because they have not yet actively spoken out against their partnership. They have not withdrawn it, and that partnership even goes further, as in Blast is actively with the partnership helping develop Neom. So that's even a worse case than the LEC. Now, I do think that this is definitely a black page in the history books of the LEC, and this will take a lot of time to be rebuilt. And I think it's up to Riot to choose their future partners very carefully, but also commit even more to sending out that message that what they stand for is not in line with what the Saudi Arabian government practices when it comes to human rights. When I look at it, it all seems a bit like a facade, because in the end, I think many corporations, Riot Games included, are mainly after one thing, and that's making money. And they just test the limits of how far they can bend the borders and how far into the gray area they can get before they cross the line, basically. So how this will look in the history books and how people will look on Riot Games, I think definitely people will still remember this. This was such a big event and so many people spoke out against this. This will not be forgotten. But since this is an incident and since the LEC is so beloved by many, this is the most beloved League of Legends competition in the world, praised for its production, praised for its tone, and definitely something the fans deeply care about. So while this is a wound that will need healing, I definitely think that Riot Games now will take the steps to carefully make sure that people will at least quote-unquote forgive it, as in not have it be an active part of the discussion. And you already see that kind of people have mostly forgotten about it, as people do. They are outraged when it matters, and then when it gets solved or it gets addressed, then they quiet down. We saw it with Blizzard, with the whole Hong Kong and Blitzchung affair. People were up in arms for weeks until Blizzard decided to soften the punishment and partially reverse what the punishment they issued to Blitzchung. And now everybody is happily playing Hearthstone again. So that is something that will just need time. But I am confident that Riot Games will heal from this.
Well, then let me cross-apply that same question about all the countries that participated in the 1932 Summer Olympics in Nazi Germany, and then with esports continuing to have this event or having Worlds in Shanghai in the midst of genocide in Western China. I mean, is this going to be that black page for esports?
No, that won't be. Part of it is that what happens in China, unfortunately, for many fans in the West, for many people in the West, is a bit of a distant thing. Also, it's not being covered a lot in the news at the moment, so fewer people are aware of it. And I think those two factors mainly combine into people just being accepting of the fact that this is happening in China. As I said earlier, people know that Riot Games is owned by China, and that is something they have come to learn to live with. And I do hope that people get up in arms about it, because obviously what's happening in China is horrible and should be addressed, and it should not happen. But people here will not have as much influence as they had on the Neom deal, because Riot Games is simply owned by a Chinese conglomerate.
Why are fans so willing to acquiesce to Chinese malfeasance, which is, let's say 15,000 miles away from anything happening in the US, but not so much to Saudi Arabia, which is, 13,000 miles away happening from the US, right? I mean, aren't we playing semantics here? Like, what is the reason why there's up in arms for Saudi, but not for China?
Well, I think China does at least a much better job at getting away with things in general. It's in all the many products we use. And I think in general, when we look at people, like, do people still get up in arms about their iPhones and their Samsung products or whatever it is being made in these horrible working conditions? No, they don't. There are groups rightfully fighting for this, and when you ask people about it, they will definitely condemn it. But this is just something that unfortunately people have come to learn to live with, and this Saudi Arabian thing is very new in esports. This is a new line being crossed. China has been in esports for a long time, and people, as with products that are being made in China, they just have accepted it. I think this is true in every layer of society, not just in esports. People know what's happening in China, and it's horrible, but it's almost inevitable that you use these Chinese products and that China is involved with this. And Saudi Arabia, however, is new to esports. This is very new. Mohammed bin Salman wants to make Saudi Arabia some sort of seemingly progressive nation that's futuristic and is, hanging out with the cool kids in that sense. But fact of the matter is, and I think, again, this is true in every layer of society, that people have kind of come to accept that you cannot evade China at this moment. And that is sad, it's tragic, and I wish it were different, but there's no way around China, and even less so for Riot Games because they are owned by Tencent.
Well, let's see if the hand-wringing around China metastasizes into some sort of action.
I hope so, yeah, absolutely.
With that, Tom, thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you very much for having me.